Welcome to the fourth episode in a Legendarium series called Anglo-Saxons versus Vikings. In part 4, Coming of the Whirlwind, we will talk about how King Ethelred of England tried to show some strength, but only made the Viking invasion far worse. King Ethelred claimed that one of his counselors informed him that the Danes living in England would faithlessly take his life and then all his counselors and then possess his kingdom. These Danes had lived in England since the great heathen army's invasion more than a century ago. After the House of Wessex reconquered England, they accepted the rule of English kings, became Christians, and learned to speak English. They paid taxes, owned land, practiced trades, and served in militias, but that did not matter to Ethelred's court. The king wanted to do something to show strength for once, and the Danes in England proved an easy target. King Ethelred sent messages to royal officers in every shire across England and urged them to move during an upcoming Christian holiday when everyone would be in church and vulnerable. Given the hardships caused by Danish raiding over the last 20 years, the English readily believed that their Danish neighbors caused their grief. Across England, mobs stirred up by Ethelred's officials carried out mass slaughters of Danes across the kingdom. Oxford saw an especially pitiful sight. A group of Danish townsmen sought sanctuary in the church, and the priest barricaded the doors. When the priest refused to hand the Danes over to the enraged mob, they set fire to their own church, and dozens died a slow death by asphyxiation. No one knows how many died during the St. Brice's Day massacre, yet among them a woman named Gunhild, the sister of King Sweyn, Forkbeard of Denmark, perished cruelly. She had married a Dane in England named Paleg Toksin, whom Ethelred made Earl of Devon. When her brother Sweyn learned of his sister's murder at the hands of a man he trusted, he swore to bring the Whirlwind to England. Gunhild's death marked a shift in the Viking onslaught. Instead of lightning raids that appeared and disappeared, Sweyn Forkbeard launched a systematic campaign of destruction. On Christmas Day, 1005, Sweyn Forkbeard led a march from Hampshire through Reading. He burned everything he could and left blackened desolation in his wake. Towards the climax of the campaign, Sweyn seized Wallingford-on-Thames, where he burned fortifications that Ethelred's government built at great expense. The next day, Sweyn led his army to Chelsea, where Ethelred endowed a church to his murdered brother-in-law, King Edward. After taking the town, Sweyn stole the expensive fabric that Ethelred personally donated to his brother's church. Next, he took the Great Ridgeway into Wessex and sought a mound said to house the bones of ancient English kings. He went there simply to take up a challenge Ethelred made, that if the Vikings ever dared to touch the Wessex tombs, they would never see the sea again. To mock Ethelred's empty boast, Sweyn occupied the mounds long enough to show that no English army would come. As Sweyn returned to the sea, his army flaunted their loot as they marched past the royal palace at Westminster. The bitter words of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle noted that Ethelred's court saw a confident and arrogant host passing their gates, bringing provisions and treasures from more than 50 miles inland. King Ethelred's paralyzed government decided to pay yet another round of tribute, this time 36,000 pounds of silver. King Ethelred took action, but not against the Vikings. In the year 1008 AD, he published a new law code intended to address the fears of England's ruling class. It prescribed new penalties for evils now eating away at their households, like disloyalty, desertion, and poverty. It sought to address a kingdom which feared that God did not bless the king. In it, Ethelred's scribes wrote, "We must all love and honor one God, and completely cast out every heathen practice, and let us loyally hold to one royal Lord, and defend life and land as best we can, and beseech Almighty God for help." Warhawks in the Witenagemot, an assembly of notables which advised the king, wanted action rather than prayers. To that end, they ordered the construction of a new fleet, titanic in size, totaling 300 ships, each one crewed by 50 rowers and a complement of troops. They assembled in Sandwich Bay, which guarded the English Channel at its narrowest point and housed its greatest trade port. Any Danish fleet had to sail past Sandwich Bay, and thus the English could force a final battle. Yet the endless backbiting and intrigues of Ethelred's court became worms in the hull. One lord named Bertrick accused another, Wulnoth, of treason, and the latter fled with 20 ships. Wulnoth asked the Witenagemot for 80 ships to bring Bertrick to justice. Those 80 ships ran into slashing rain and howling winds, which wrecked the entire fleet. This so discouraged the royal party that they simply dispersed the fleet and went home. The author of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle lamented, "So inconsiderately, the efforts of the whole nation were cast to nothing." That wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.